Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session, a special panel on the cloud. We've got a fantastic lineup of speakers and panelists for you. Some of you might have met them or seen them earlier because I think most of my panel have given presentations already. But just in case you haven't seen them, I'm going to ask them to give a short self-introduction and also ask you to just, in a few sentences, explain what your interest in the cloud is. So, Muriel, could you start?
Okay, so my name is Muriel Lubellac. I'm the CEO of Videomont. So Videomont is a French company based in Montpellier, and we are a reseller and a software editor around all the file-based workflows. So in the cloud, so our interest is about the fact communicating with the human skills. So that means proposing a platform that take advantages on the automated tools in the cloud and the human abilities to validate it.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Andrey Marchuk from Deluxe, Vice President of Software Systems Architecture. At Deluxe, we are presenting at IBC our platform called Deluxe One. And I'm focusing there on software architecture, best practices, security, and cost. The platform is cloud-based, and it solves all the end-to-end supply chain by aggregating all of the vertical services that Deluxe provide under one roof, like we like to call it, from lens to living room.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Job Janssen, CEO of Aperi. Aperi is a Californian-based company that specializes in low latency, virtualization, media processing. And our interest in cloud is actually the distributed cloud architectures for live, low latency, remote production of sports and other events.
Excellent. Isaac?
Hello, I'm Isak Jonsson, the CTO of Videospine, a Swedish-based company building API-based asset management services. My interest in cloud is that when we started Videospine, it was all about microservices, so it was a natural step to move them over to the cloud. So the cloud, to me, promises ease of use and also a promise to scale. So that's why my interest in cloud.
Very good.
Hi, my name is Bhaskar. I'm co-founder and technology evangelist at Amagi Media Labs. Amagi, I don't think Amagi and cloud can be differentiated. So Amagi is a cloud-managed broadcast platform. We enable starting from ingest of content till the whole playout and monetization, completely happening on public cloud infrastructure. So we announced our first cloud playout in 2012. So we've kind of waited for the cloud to happen, and I think it's happening as we speak. And our interests are tightly merged to the cloud. So in that sense, we are part of it.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent introduction. I'm sure we'll get into some deep dive stuff, but let's start at the sort of very high level. And I'd really like to ask you, each of you, but in any order, what's the sweet spot right now? Where is the cloud giving the maximum payback? I know many of you are involved in different aspects of it, but what is the sweet spot of the cloud right now? Who'd like to pick that up? Job, do you want to?
Yeah, I think cloud is excellent for activity-based costing of your infrastructures. So if you need your services only to be run for an hour or for certain workloads, that you can start and stop and pay only for when you need it, rather than buy your own infrastructure. You have that already on the file-based non or near-live applications, but now you can even do that for live production, where you have a match and you spin up your services, and when the match is over, you move the services to another stadium. So it's the utility-based and metered services of cloud that brings a lot of value to our industry.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because almost until this IBC, most people would say cloud's great for a lot of things, but not live production, and I'm seeing that changing. Anyone else like to comment on the sweet spot?
Yeah, so cloud allows actually to be a lot more agile. From engineering's perspective, you don't have to procure and install and configure your hardware. You don't need to have a staff that takes care of your data center. You need redundancy, so you would need like 2 redundant networks, electricity, cooling, all of that taken care of in the cloud. And also, the cost is very predictable, because if some equipment breaks up in your data center, you have to all of a sudden invest more CapEx, buy more equipment to replace the broken one. So from that perspective, cloud helps us to reduce the cost and focus on what's important on the product. So now the team can focus on actually provisioning the cloud infrastructure using the code, and also deliver faster, because you don't have to think about the underlying servers.
And Muriel?
Yeah, I think it's definitely about elasticity, agility, and what we propose at Eolmont is really a toolbox. So something on the top of it, providing you all the tools you are generally using on premise. So and let you just choose whatever you want, wherever you want, and the time you want.
Sure.
So
Pascal, the sweet spot?
Yeah, I think the fundamental advantage that cloud has created is, if you look at the whole media entertainment industry per se, there's been a transformation. We're going through a business transformation that's happening, and largely driven by economics is changing. We were in the linear world, broadcasting, you pipe one on the satellite, everybody makes money. But unfortunately, that's not the truth today. We have further and further globalization of content, which means driving smaller and smaller bits of content and fragments that you need to send to many people. You are already having capabilities that the economics of the whole business is changing. Yeah. What used to be in CapEx and years of operations which you could actually do amortization doesn't exist. And I think the cloud economics tracks that particular exact business dynamics that you need. So fundamentally here, you can be in a world where you can actually buy things on a per hour, per minute basis today, literally, which essentially lends to your business dynamics. Right. So business models, be it and from managing your assets to play out to transmissions to ward and monetize, everything's kind of now tied to specifically like what he talked about as activity-based costing models, sure, where per action there is a clear ROI that you can actually calculate on. Right. I think that's the beauty of the cloud eventually.
So Isaac, is there anything left in terms of sweet spots that we could talk about?
Well, of course the OpEx model is great, but as an engineer, what I take away from the cloud, what I see in the cloud is that it forces us to move away from the server thinking and instead think of services. Yes. So, and by thinking of services, it's also make different products easier to communicate with each other. It's not about, if we were just replacing servers with EC2s and storage with S3, it's no big gain. But by replacing it with services in the cloud, that's where I see the sweet spot.
Right, that's good. And several of you have commented on the economics, but the economics for an end user must be very different to what they're experienced with in terms of CapEx and so on. We're moving to an OpEx. How do you explain the real return on investment when they haven't been used to doing these kind of calculations? How do you explain the return on investment for cloud installations?
I think I can kind of start off this conversation, because I had a conversation as of yesterday with one of my customers who's kind of deciding between an on-prem and a cloud and a hybrid model that they're looking at. And each one of them are giving very different economic models. So one is completely CapEx driven, which is a high expense initially, then there's a lower expense. So what they have done, and this is one template that a lot of the customers could potentially lose, what's my ROI? They look at things, I'm a 3-year or a 5-year amortization. How does cloud perform vis-a-vis what I'm going to do? And they take the whole capital expense and actually do a IRR interest rate on top of it, and figuring out, saying, okay, this is my cost if I'm going to put my $100 to right now. What is my cost over the 5 years versus I'm going to bid $1 each on a per month basis? How is it going to really perform? So that's the sort of calculation. This is one approach that one of my customers is taking to validate whether a cloud-based platform helps them.
Yeah.
The second advantage that I think they see, for example, is take, for example, redundancies, right? I think you touched upon redundancies, right? Redundancy used to be a static word. What it means is, I need a channel or a thing to be redundant, it's redundant every time. But that's not the case. At 2 a.m. in the morning, you don't want it to be redundant. Literally, you can actually switch it off, for example. So technically, because this lends to those architectures where you can actually choose redundancies, whether you want a 5.9 redundancies or 4.9 redundancy or the same channel, same time, you can actually choose redundancies, which essentially makes it much more exciting and possibility. These are the two economic levers that you could potentially look at.
So, yeah, I mean, we can see these kind of arguments, but how do we really get those across so that people can quantify those benefits?
Yeah. So the traditional way is to go to the CFO and have a spreadsheet and
Sure.
Basically calculate the current infrastructure cost versus what he's going to pay over the project cost. But one element that maybe I want to highlight is also standards are changing all the time. We're very innovative, and especially in the future zone, right, about coming up with even better technologies. So I had a customer that said, okay, he just bought a lot of 2022-6 equipment, of licenses. And I told him, hey, when are you going to 2110? And he said, next year. Do you realize that in the normal world, or in the traditional world, you had to buy all the licenses again and have to double the cost? Well, if you go to the cloud and have a microservices and a floating license concept, you can actually, with a mix and match arrangement, you could buy your future already and use the assets that you bought and the resources that you bought, you can use them to future new standard use. And that was very convincing, because he said, okay, because HDR, I don't have HDR yet, but HDR is coming, and some customers are asking that from me. So it's kind of the future proofing, because you are agile on your microservices level.
Yeah. And Isaac, you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, as I'm not a cloud provider, I can say I don't promise it will be cheaper by going to cloud, but it's really inexpensive to test out things. So if you want to test a new service on the cloud, it's going to cost you $14 or something like that. Instead of, as you say, you have to buy new equipment. So you can really try out new workflows, new models at a low price, and then you can see for yourself and do the math. Is it worth it?
Right. Andrey, do you have a view on this, the business models?
I wanted to say that I think one of the best ways to start in the cloud is to use some of the new tech that is really kind of expensive to invest on off-site kind of data center end. Like if you want to do some machine learning and you need to invest in GPUs, which are expensive and you need a lot of them, and you usually will train your model, what will you do with that equipment? So cloud is really perfect for such use cases, and I think maybe once you start integrating such use cases, it's easy to show the agility of the cloud to organization and executives so they can see the benefit on the other ends.
Right, I guess some of the things like machine learning and AI, it's not necessarily even practical to have the physical hardware on your premises. You need the bursty expansion and some of the services that these cloud providers have available. Yeah.
Oh, for example, Google in machine learning, they have their own hardware called TPUs, which are a lot more productive than GPUs. That's not something you can have in your data center.
Yeah. Muriel, we'll get to some of the soft issues here, but do you have something in the short term on the sort of return on investment front?
Yeah, I completely agree about what you said before, but I'm not sure this is only the ROI we need to consider, because cloud allows you to be more collaborative, I think, and to just be a bridge between the different entities which are dealing with content, and add some more values with human connecting to the platform, adding some tools, or correcting some automated tools like AI, which is very important to use in the cloud, and very great. And if you can teach AI more and more. Still being in the cloud, you just gain time and you can monetize your content maybe in a more rapid way.
I think that's a good point that she raised. I think it's important for us to understand is when you're convincing a CFO, looking at a total cost of ownership of the whole thing and what sort of ROI that you're going to get might be interesting. Because like what she touched upon, collaboration, for example, although it looked like a soft issue, it has hard numbers in terms of productivity of people and operations and where you kind of place your operations from a remoteness standpoint, which if as a vendor, sometimes you're forced to design in a complete end-to-end saving model, not specifically saying, okay, I'm going to give you this particular piece of the puzzle, because there are concomitant benefits like what she talked about, which will be interesting to look at as well.
So actually you just triggered, all of you have triggered a thought in my mind, because you talked of collaborative working and different ways of working. I could imagine that if you go to a traditional broadcaster, for example, they have difficulties in changing the way they're working. If you go to a startup, probably they don't have that history, that momentum from the past. Can you comment on the people attitudes, the workflows, the skill set, the psychology of it? Has someone got some experience of selling some of these ideas? Because unless they change as well, you're not going to get the benefits, are you?
Yes.
Right. Yuri, I'm sure you've got something on that front.
Yes, in fact, you have to convince all the people. So that means you must convince the post-production houses which are sending content to the broadcaster. You have to convince the broadcasters, the editorial team, the technical team. So you have the whole staff to convince, because you change the workflow anyway. And but they began to think about it, and they see the advantages. It goes a lot faster than before. It's not emails, phone to check if the video is correct, etc. So it's a long-term process to convince them, but they are going this way again, from my point of view.
Thanks for that. Anyone else got a view on attitudes, the human factors?
Yeah, so I think it's very important to have a holistic approach to this process, to understand everything from beginning to end, and communicate that very clearly to the whole organization, not only top managers, but the whole level, so people can be on board and be committed to that. Because oftentimes what happens is organizations kind of try to enforce it, but people don't understand why. And I think this messages of why helps people be a part of the mission. That's a psychological factor.
Anything else on the
what
soft factor?
we have seen at least is I think it's not about technology. I think mindset change is the hardest problem in this industry for us to change, literally, right? And because it brings in new experiences, new workflows, and new economics. So we have to kind of drive this change dramatically. In our experience, for example, I think the biggest challenge is if I am in a broadcaster who's been 20 years plus in the same industry, I've been buying gears, buying hardware, buying things, and actually the whole thing has been working well, fundamentally. Now, why do I change when maybe I'm retiring the next 3 years? Should I stick my neck out and create something which I don't know whether I should or not? This is the biggest challenge. And I think truly so, it's a big change for anybody to bet on. Having said that, we're seeing two classes, like what you rightly pointed out. Startups, for example, in the US, there's a lot of digital-first companies evolving. These are millennials creating new content and delivering content across the globe. They see this as fish to water, right? They just kind of connect to this very easily because everything is virtualized. They've never seen a hardware gear in their lives, which is good. So it kind of connects very well for them. But interestingly, we're seeing even the large broadcasters, driven by economics as the primary is changing, and even elephants can dance, and I think that's happening already. Speak. Okay. So I think that's starting to happen, and that's the most exciting part of the whole industry is changing. 3 years back, I wouldn't have been so optimistic, but I'm seeing that happening as we speak.
That's very interesting. It sort of leads me on to my next question, because we can all see that if you've got a greenfield site, that's a fairly straightforward thing. Have any of you got experience of introducing cloud practices into a well-established, old-school kind of environment, and how you go about, or how people have gone about introducing cloud services into that environment?
Yeah, maybe I can. So in live sports production, you normally have your B vans that are completely wired up once, and everybody knows If you put the power on, it will exactly work the same way as the time before. And we replaced that with some cloud-based solutions, both centralized as well as at the venue. And the biggest scare for them was, will it spin up, right? Because it's not physical, it's not cabled up, it has not been tested the day before. The premise is, you come there, you spin it up, and it should work. And the interface layer, the human interface layer, actually exactly the same. But everything what is processing is completely now virtualized. And when it spins up, what happens during the match? If it spins up so easily, it can spin down very easily. So the human factor of, can I trust this? It takes a few matches, and it takes some just having experienced it, that actually it is as reliable as clunky hardware.